Welcome back to Polygon Academy, everybody. My name is Tim, and this is part 3 of the trim texture creation tutorial series. In the last video, we sculpted a high poly mesh inside of ZBrush while keeping it tileable, and now it's time to bring that high poly sculpt into Substance Painter, bake it down to a flat 2D texture, and really add some surface materials that brings the whole thing together. So we're in the home stretch, and this is where it hopefully all comes together. But you can also have the nicest sculpt in the world, and if the final surface materials and textures don't look that great, it's kind of all for nothing. But we're going to totally avoid that by using some smart materials that I have in my library to quickly prototype different looks for our trim sheet and hopefully get some really nice results fast. I'm going to go over some general workflow stuff that I find super useful, such as how I test to make sure that my texture is actually tiling properly inside of Substance Painter, and also some final tips and tricks inside of Painter when it comes to creating your surface materials that hopefully will keep your trim sheet a lot more versatile as an end result. If you're enjoying the series so far, don't forget to smash that like button. Leave any comments and questions down below. You guys know the drill by now. But let's hop over to the computer and get started creating our final material inside of Substance Painter. All right, so here we are back in 3D Studio Max. We've exported all of our high poly sculpted pieces from ZBrush. Just a quick note, if your computer isn't super powerful, you might want to decimate those meshes or maybe export the second highest subdivision level. A lot of the times there isn't really much of a noticeable difference between, say, maybe like 1 million and I don't know, like 500,000 polys between the two subdivision levels. So if bringing, 8 to 10 to 15 million polygons inside of Max really starts to chug your computer, either decimate the meshes or just export a slightly lower subdivision level and you'll probably get the exact same results. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly import all of these high poly sculpted pieces. And right now you can see I just have the basic plane that we used as our base mesh. It's still got all the subdivision lines where we kind of cut in our individual trims as a guide. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly bring in all of these high poly sculpted pieces, and they should just pop in exactly over top of where we already had them. I'm just using the ZBrush import preset, and I'm going to actually untick import materials, and it's just going to import each of the trims as its own mesh. So here you can see, if I turn off wireframe mode, here's the bottom trims. I'm just going to go through and quickly import all the rest of them. So now we've got all of our high poly sculpted pieces imported into Max, and what we're going to do is if we look in the front view, you can pretty much, if I turn off the grid, this is pretty much exactly how our normal map is going to look. What we're going to do here is we need to actually duplicate some of these meshes onto the other sides of the mesh where it would basically tile over. That way when we go to bake it, it's actually going to calculate the AO, even though those pieces aren't really seen. You would still get a slight bit of AO from that piece that's kind of off screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to take, say, this mesh here, and we're going to just quickly duplicate this over. Shift drag it as a copy, and because the pivot is still in the center of this mesh here, I can actually just down at the bottom here type in 4 meters, and that's going to set it exactly 4 meters over to the right. And then I'm going to do the same for this one here. Just copy it and put this at -4 meters, and do the same for pretty much every piece. And some of these pieces have actually slightly shrunken inwards from when we subdivided them. So we're going to have to eyeball them, some of them into place. It's usually not very hard to do, but you'll see what I mean in a second here. So it's the exact same thing. Just move this one -4 meters. And 4 meters. So if I deselect it, you can see there's a tiny bit of a gap, and that's caused by when you subdivide in ZBrush. Sometimes the sides of your meshes will shrink inwards. It's not that big of a deal because when we were sculpting with wrap mode, all of the exact positions of the damage and stuff still lines up, but the mesh overall's dimensions just kind of shrunk. So I'm just going to grab this and slightly move it into place until it looks pretty seamless. That should be pretty good. And same for this side too. That's pretty good. And what we're going to do here is same exactly. You only need to duplicate the pieces that match up on the edges that would naturally appear next when you tile the texture. So basically just this green one goes over here. Just make sure it's exactly set to 4 meters. And this pink one goes over here. It's helpful that when you import them into Max, it actually gives them a bunch of different colors, because it's easy to sometimes get confused and be like, oh, if it's all gray, is it this brick that goes over here? Is it this brick that goes over here? But by having all these different colors, it makes it super easy to keep track of things. And for this top trim here, remember that we need to actually because this little knobbly piece is actually divided in half on the edge of the texture. What we need to do is make sure this is the exact same one as the end one here. So I'm just gonna actually delete this green one, take this, move it over exactly 4 meters. And that way there won't be a little tiny seam down the center of this knobbly piece too. So now that we have all of our edge pieces and where the seams would naturally be duplicated and lined up, we can actually just export this as the high poly that we're going to bake inside of Substance Painter. To do that, I'm just going to select everything, and you actually deselect all that. That's all of our old placeholder geometry. We don't need that anymore. But what I am going to deselect is the low poly plane, because that's actually going to be its own separate object that we export. So I just have all of the high poly stuff. If I move it out of the way, you can see I've deselected the plane. And I'm just going to export this as a FBX. Export selected. And I'm going to call this trim sheet high. You can call it whatever you like. All right, so the high poly is exported. There's some other things you can do, like say assign each trim a different colored material, and that way you can bake out a color mask inside of Painter. That's a little bit more complex than we're going to actually touch on in this tutorial. I might make its own separate tutorial for fast and easy masking inside of Substance Painter at a later date. But for this tutorial, it's going to all be like stone, and it's not going to be like, different types of metals and stuff like that. So we're really just going to apply one basic overall surface type to this mesh, to this baked texture. So we don't really need to worry about that for now. I'm just going to hide this all. And so we're just going to use this as our low poly. I'm not even going to bother removing these extra segments that we used as guides in the beginning to lay out our trims, because actually these can actually even become handy by masking by Polygon inside of Substance Painter on the low poly. So say we did want, say, a slightly different stone for 2 different trims, you can actually just use these polygons to quickly mask between the 2 materials. So that'll come in handy, and it's not going to add any extra overhead or anything like that. So what we're going to do now is export our low poly, just this plane that we're going to use to bake our 2D texture to that's tiling. And because this is a basic plane that we created inside of 3D Studio Max, it already has UVs. So if I add an unwrap UVW modifier, you can see here the UVs are already perfectly snapped to the 0 to 1 UV space, which is important because if the UVs were slightly inside, it's not going to tile. It's going to render some blank empty texture space. So by default on a plane, it's usually snapped to the 0 to 1, especially if it's a square ratio. But what you want to do is just make sure that these top verts here are the actual top verts on the 3D geometry, because sometimes if you rotate a plane and then maybe rotate it another way by accident, when you render your texture, it actually might render the trims vertically if the UVs aren't matching the way that the 3D geometry is oriented that you're baking to. But in this case, we just literally rotated it straight up, so I know that the top verts are straight up in where the 2D texture is going to render as well, so we're all good. Now what I'm going to do is just select this and export it as trim sheet low as an FBX. Nothing fancy at all. And like I said, keeping all these extra segments is actually going to be beneficial inside of Substance Painter, because at the end of the day, we're actually not even going to be using this geometry really. It's just all about rendering a tiling texture to a 2D image, and we don't need to worry about optimization or anything like that. So let's hop over to a Substance Painter and get started rendering out the normal map and then adding some surface texture to this material. Here we are inside of Substance Painter. What I'm going to do is just go File, New. The template, we're going to be using this texture inside of Unreal Engine 4, so I'm just using the basic Unreal Engine 4 template. Where it says File, this is where we select our low poly. So I'm going to go to my export and choose Trim Sheet Low. And the document resolution, 2048, that's what we're going to be working at. You can bump it up to 4096 if you really want to. But like I said, most textures nowadays that I use in game are actually just 2048s, and it's not going to add a lot of extra chugginess if I'm always working at 4096. And really, a lot of the times you won't even notice the difference. So if you really want to bump it up and re-export your textures afterwards, that's great. But I would recommend it working at something like 2048. It'll just save Substance Painter from really chugging and taking a long time, especially when you're using things like smart materials, which we're going to be doing on this texture. So, okay, perfect. Just, yep, the low, and hit OK. And so here we have our basic plane imported into Substance Painter, nothing too fancy. If I go over here to the texture set settings, this is where we're going to bake our high poly onto a normal map. So if I scroll through here, I'm going to actually make this a bit bigger. So it's normally, it's right next to the layers. You just click on texture set settings. And if you scroll down, you're going to see bake mesh maps. And we're going to hit that. And where it says high definition meshes, we're just going to click this little paper icon here, and we're going to choose the high. And we're not, for this example, I'm not going to change any of these settings, and it's actually going to have a problem when it bakes, I can almost guarantee you. And I'll show you what the problem looks like, so if it happens to you, you can recognize it, and then I'll show you exactly how to fix it. So I'm just going to hit Bake Default Mesh Maps, and what is going to happen is I think it's going to be kind of a garbly result, as if it's like sort of half rendered the normal map. Just guessing based on previous experience. So let's take a look and see what this looks like after it does this first bake. Yep, as I predicted. So the default material ID, that says it failed because we didn't assign different multicolored materials. We're not really worried about that. But as you can see, the resulting bake is not ideal. It got some of the detail, but it looks like these trims weren't quite captured properly. So what we're going to do is we're just going to hit Bake Mesh Maps again, and we're going to increase our max frontal distance. So because the plane is at the back of all that high poly geometry, and it doesn't have any depth, a lot of the rays that it's casting to bake the normal map aren't actually going far out enough to capture all that 3D geometry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase this up to something like maybe 0.35. I wouldn't recommend cranking this up. Adjust this slowly in increments. If you crank it, I've experienced Painter crashing a lot when it bakes. So I'm just going to boost this up to something like 0.35, hit bake again, and we're going to see if the results are a lot better. All right, so now that it is rebaked, you can see that the results are pretty much the exact same as our high poly looks like, and we don't have any more of that garbled mess, and this is a really decent normal map to start from. So if I rotate around, you can see it's just the plane, and if I move the light around, you get all this nice high poly detail captured onto it, basically a flat 2D image. So what I'm going to do next is this is how I actually check that my textures are tiling nicely inside of Substance Painter. Unfortunately, I haven't found an option where you can just increase the tiling of your 2D texture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop back over to 3D Studio Max. I'm going to click on my trim sheet low, go into the sub-object mode inside the editable poly. I'm just going to duplicate this over here. I'm just going to snap it here, and then duplicate it again, and snap it here. So if you think about it, we've duplicated this center piece that we've rendered our texture to. So on all three pieces, all of the UVs are stacked on top of each other, which is going to make it tile across these three pieces of the mesh. And because we're not writing any bake information or AO information or anything like that from a 3D mesh that it's trying to capture anymore, because we've already baked it, we don't need to worry about it screwing up or anything like that. So what I'm going to do is just quickly re-export this as the trim sheet low. And in Painter, what I'm going to do is go to Edit, Project Configuration. And here you can see where we select our 2D mesh. I'm just going to select this and re-import trim sheet low, hit OK. And you can see it's going to bring in that mesh. And that's exactly how we can see if there's any crazy seams or anything like that. And I think even where our little pattern was kind of screwed up, maybe there's a little bit of a weirdness going on, but that's not a huge deal. You'll never ever notice that in a game, especially if it's on a wall or something like that. So I think we're pretty good. So you can see basically this is what the texture looks like when it's tiling 3 times. I don't really see anything that stands out as too repetitive in terms of like a big slash crack, like yeah, maybe this little one, but it's a fine, like I said, it's a fine balance between some nice interesting detail, and being too bland. And I think we have a really good balance and a really good base to start from this texture. And for this, what I'm going to use is a smart material. So I know a lot of you guys are probably familiar with smart materials. It's basically like a preset of different settings for different layers of, custom made materials. So you can get some really nice like rusty metals, or in this case, we're going to use a stone smart material that I've got. If I remember where I got it from, I'll find the link and put it in the description. But I know that they all start with WER. And so you can see I have this set of stone smart materials, and if I just drag them and drop them onto our mesh here, back to layers, you can see that it instantly gives you, all these edge highlights and the grunge and the cracks and stuff like that. So this is just like a pack that I bought off of Gumroad. And for me, anytime I see a really good set of smart materials, I'll usually invest in it right away if it's like $5–10, because I know it's going to save me a lot of time in the future than trying to manually, do all this work. And if it gives you a really good base to start from and saves you a lot of time, if you value your time at, $30, $40, $100 an hour, having something that saves you a lot of time for $5 or $10 is a steal of a deal. So if you see I just drag and drop out some of these different stone looks, it allows you to really quickly prototype and test out different looks too for your textures. So you can see there's this one, it's pretty subtle. I think this might be the one that I will end up using. I'm just going to quickly drag, test out some of these other ones. Depending on the look that I would want the final texture to have. So this one's kind of nice. It's like a gray stone. I usually go for pretty evenly mid-tones, especially if this was going to be on a modular set. I don't want a lot of like high contrast or something like that. And so you can actually see right off the bat, these smart materials I find actually do a really over-exaggerated amount of edge highlighting, which I don't think looks that good. But the nice thing is most smart materials have all the layers accessible to you, and you can go in and tone things down or increase things as you want them. So what I'm going to do is go through and find the layers that are controlling all that like white edge highlighting. And to be honest, I think a lot of people, when they're doing rocks and stuff like that, they'll throw on a material and really have a lot of edge highlights, and that to me instantly usually jumps out as more of an amateur or beginner looking material, because they think, oh, I need to show all the shapes of this rock or this stone, so I'll have all these nice edge highlights, and they really exaggerate it, which in turn kills how it will react to light in the game engine, because if every edge has a highlight, if there's a light moving across the surface, it's not really going to get a nice subtle shift in highlights and shadows. So that's like, to me, it's a fine balance between adding some suggested detail that shows the forms and really going overboard and having all this edge highlighting. It does come down to personal preference and the overall art style. So you can see if I just remove this, it removes all of that edge highlighting. I want some still, so I'm going to go into this, and you can just turn layers on and off and see what they do. I'm looking for the layer that is really adding all of that intense edge highlights to the mesh. And so you can see it's actually this top layer. So what I'm going to do is in the base color, I'm going to drop this down quite a bit. And Substance Painter is a lot like Photoshop, but you can actually edit individual channels, right? So you have your base color, your roughness, your metallic, your normal, etc., etc. So if I remove this in the base color, it's not necessarily going to remove it from the roughness and all that. So if you can have layers that only affect the roughness, and you can get really nice surface variations as light rolls across the surface. If you say have like water streaks that are only appearing in the roughness or something like that. But in this case, I don't want these crazy white edge highlights that much. So I'm going to take this and just really drop it down. Not quite remove it completely. Maybe something to like a quarter of what it was before. And then I'm just going to go through here and just really de-emphasize a lot of this high contrast noise that is being added to the texture. So what I'm going to do is quickly just go through some of these layers and add or change or remove some of the stuff until I get a look that I'm pretty happy with as a starting point. And then we're going to add a little bit of grime on top of that, and we should be in a pretty good, decent shape to have at least an alpha quality texture that we can move onto and use to map onto some 3D geometry. So I think this is a pretty good base to start from in terms of, there's a nice amount of contrast in here. Maybe still a little bit too much because you really don't want to underestimate just how much your in-game lighting and reflections are going to really impact your textures and materials. So I usually tend to go lower contrast than I think it should be. And then you can add stuff like decals on top of it actually to add more contrast selectively in certain areas rather than having grime over everything. But what I'm going to do is add a little bit more surface variation by adding a subtle surface grime to this. And the way I usually go about doing this for stuff like stone is I'll just go into the basic materials and I'll usually grab something like the maybe the concrete simple or the concrete dusty and drop that on. So that's going to overwrite everything. So here's my smart material in the layer stack and here's the concrete simple. What I'm going to do is, increase some of the dirtiness because we're going to mask most of this away. And so this is going to be acting like a dust and a dirt. So I'm going to give it like a little bit of a color temperature difference and bring down the overall value on it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a smart mask to actually add most of this dirt layer just into the grooves and cracks and really just break up my basic stone surface a little bit more. Smart materials are a great way to quickly try out different looks and get a really good, as a good starting point. And then you probably want to do some hand painting and custom work on top of your material or texture afterwards. But a lot of the times what I'll do is I'll just toss on some smart materials, layer up some grime and rust and stuff like that, and then just use some smart mask, export it into the engine, and that'll be like my alpha quality texture that I can use to quickly UV an entire modular set, get a really good look and feel, and get things into the engine and functional as fast as possible, rather than sitting there from the start hand painting in little drips and grime and stuff like that. It's the whole 80-20 process. If I can get to the 80% mark really, really fast, I can go back and do that 20% of hand polish afterwards towards the end of the project. Because if I have 10 materials and textures to do and a modular kit, if I get stuck in the weeds noodling on one material for like 2 or 3 days at work, I could run out of time and not have enough time to actually finish my work. So I'll get everything to that alpha quality and then polish afterwards for the entire set and the materials and stuff like that. So it's a good way to work and just let the procedural tools do a lot of the heavy lifting up front and then go in and add that artistic touch at the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take this dirt leak dry, drag and drop it. Again, you can just undo, try different looks, and obviously you can adjust the parameters to get more specific look. So what I'm going to do is just drop this dirt leak in dry, and this doesn't look great. It's super intense. It looks really procedural. But what I'm going to do is go into the mask here, click on the grunge leak small, and you can change the certain attributes like the balance, contrast. Something like that. And then, because I want an overall level of dirt, but I really don't want it this intense, what I'm going to do is go on the concrete simple and really drag this down. Again, we're affecting the base color. So it's still going to be affecting the roughness at 100% on the other channels, but I'm just going to bring this down till I get a bit of a look that I kind of want. So there we go. So if we toggle this, you can see, it adds a layer of dust and dirt to the surface. Maybe even a little less, and it just breaks up the overall material and gives it a bit of added texture to it. And then you could add stuff on top like moss in the cracks and stuff like that. I would avoid things like anything hardcore drips and streaks that are anything that's really directional, because say especially I'm already eyeballing this middle trim as I can make a square pillar really easily with that. But if I had drips dripping down the side of it, in a vertical drips, if I was to UV that onto a vertical pillar, but it's tiling horizontally up the pillar, you would have all these weird streaks coming sideways off of your pillar, which just wouldn't make sense. And say you wanted to have them along an arch, you would have this weird band of drips that kind of go inwards on an arch. It's going to make it a lot less versatile. So what I would actually recommend doing is anything like that, like hardcore heavy drips and stains, do them as decals over top of your mesh afterwards. And that way you can add some really unique looks to it, you know, some large chunks of damage here and there, drips and streaks that are more contextual to how the mesh is actually in the entire environment, versus throwing them all into your texture and then being really limited on how you can use it. So by keeping my tiling textures and my trim sheets fairly generic, probably more generic than you would actually think, they become a lot more reuseful. So you can go in and tint them and do different things with them and get a lot more out of a smaller set of textures and get more done during your day. So this is as far as I'm going to take this material for this tutorial. Like I said, I could sit down for another hour or two, add a lot more detail, but I think you guys really get the gist of it. The main thing I wanted to show you was how I bake my textures, how I check the tiling. If you did need to rebake, say something was wrong with your mesh, all you would have to do is go back into 3ds Max, go to your low poly, delete these, and then just re-export and re-import your single polygon or your single plane, and rebake, and everything would be fine. All right, so now we're going to export this material into Unreal. What we're going to do is quickly we're going to name it, because right now if we export this, it's going to name all of our textures default material, like base color, normal, whatever. We don't want that. We're going to edit the name up here. Go stone trim 01A. That way I have the option. I'm using 01A because that way I can have a B, C, D version. Say I want to have different looks to this material and texture. It keeps it really organized, especially if you're working in a team environment. That way another artist knows that the B, C, D versions, they can make the same asset with different looks, but just by swapping the textures, and it keeps things really organized and easy to use, especially when it's not just you using these things. I'm going to go to File, Export Textures. I have a preset that I already created. It's just a variation of the Unreal Engine 4 one. And you can see if I expand it out, it's going to export the base color, the occlusion, roughness, and metallic packed into one texture in the channels, and then a normal map. If I go to the Configuration tab and select, so you can select the Unreal Engine 4 one, duplicate it, rename it, whatever, and make your own setups. I have one that I like to use here. It just has the texture set, so that this with the $sign means it's going to actually just pull this and then add base color at the end of it. Super easy to use. Here in the RGB channel mask, it's going to put the AO in the R channel, the roughness in the G channel, and the metallic is going to be in the blue channel. But in this case, there's no metal on this material at all, so it's just going to be filled with black, so we don't really care about that. And that way you can get your, instead of exporting 5 or 6 different individual texture files, you can only export 3, but you still get the roughness and AO for the cost of one texture. It helps with texture memory and also saving draw calls, and just helps with basically performance and optimization. And pretty much every studio that I've worked at in the last 5 at least years has been using channel pack textures. I'll make a video on that as its own subject, but it's a very basic thing that a lot of tutorials have shown how to do already. So what I'm going to do is just save these out. Into a textures folder and hit export. Boom. So now you can see if I go to that folder, I have my base color, my normal map, and the channel mask. It looks a little weird. If you've never seen a channel mask before, we'll break this down inside of Unreal, but basically it's all of these different grayscale masks overlaid on top of each other inside of the R, G, and B channels. So that's why you get all these crazy colors, but we'll break that down inside of Unreal. Here we are back in Unreal. You guys probably recognize this scene. It's the exact same one from the first trim texture tutorial. And what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to add to this project. What I'm going to do is import those texture files, and we're going to create our material inside of Unreal. So here we are, stone trim 01A. I'm just going to select all 3, import them into this folder. So those are imported. One thing you're going to want to be careful about, so otherwise you're going to have a material that doesn't look the same as it does in Substance Painter, is for the channel textures. When we import them, if I double click this to bring up this green and yellow texture here, for the compression settings, only for this one, not for the normal map or the base color, we just have to change where it says default up here to masks, no sRGB. Otherwise, when you plug everything in, it's going to look really weird. And a lot of people are like, why doesn't my material look the same in Unreal as it does in Painter? And that's probably why, is you haven't changed your channel texture to be set to compression settings of masks. So we're going to save that. I'm just going to hit save all, just to save all these things. And what I'm going to do is just create a new material. Call this Stone Trim 1A. Perfect. I'm going to open this up. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag out my 3 texture samples here. The normal, the base color, and the channel texture. And we're simply going to plug it all in. So this goes into base color. And you'll be able to see obviously the material updating as we create it here. This goes into the normal. And it already looks, I'm going to switch this to the cube because it gives you a better idea of what the material is going to look like. And so that's just with the diffuse and the normal map. But we just have to remember the order that our channels were. So I put the ambient occlusion in the R channel. So that's going into ambient occlusion. And the G channel was our roughness. So that goes into roughness. And the B channel, we don't even really need to plug in because there is no metallic. It's literally black. And so it's default. If you don't even plug it in, I believe it's default to 0 metallic. But we're just going to plug that in to be consistent. Say maybe in the future we went into the material in Substance Painter and added some metal accent pieces or something like that. When we re-exported it, now there would be metallic information and it would automatically pick that up instead of being like, why aren't the metal pieces looking correct? Because we had left it unhooked from the metallic because there wasn't any before. So we're just, plugging things in to future-proof ourselves in case we do make some changes. So there we go. We've created our material. This is just the material editor preview window here. And we can see it looks almost the exact same as it did inside of Substance Painter, which is all good. We're not having any problems with our channel masks, creating a weird looking material, and everything's working perfectly. So we can save that. And in the next video, I'm going to be applying this to some actual 3D geometry inside of 3D Studio Max and showing you some UV tips and tricks. And then we'll eventually bring that geometry inside of Unreal as well. And I'll go over, how you can have overlapping UVs and still have the light maps work out properly, which was a huge question that a lot of people asked in the last video. But it's totally doable, and I'll show you exactly how I do that. All right, so there we have it, our final trim texture material. I'm pretty happy with the result for now, and hopefully you guys can see just how powerful Substance Painter is and how it allows you to quickly test out different looks for your trim sheets, especially when you start to use smart materials like I did in this video. In part 4 coming right up, we're going to be taking this final trim sheet material and applying it to some 3D geometry, and I'm going to be showing you all my UV tips and tricks that I use to quickly and efficiently unwrap my assets and make the most out of these trim textures. I know there was a ton of comments on the trim sheet overview video that I first put out of exactly how do I get all my UVs into these nice clean strips, and I'm going to be showing you all my tricks in that video, and hopefully it'll take the time it takes you to UV your next modular set or prop down and cut that in half. So I'm excited to dive into that. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.